And good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be. It is AT Town Hall Day. What is that?
Good morning.
9:13. Hello, all. Hello, Mike. Hello.
Hello. Is it working?
Yeah, there you go.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, everybody. Okay. How are we? Settling in to the new year? Some of us have had a little more time to settle in than others. How's it going so far?
Yeah, it's crazy. Here in Austin, we're starting week 5 of school, but I know like on my drive in, I was listening on NPR and New York this is their first day. So
Yeah. Yeah, for our kids in my home district here, they went back on last Thursday, I think, and did Thursday and Friday, and that's when they start. So yeah, you start late. Start late. So Kelly, it's been 5 weeks. What's been something good so far?
well, I'm super excited. I am starting up an AT ambassador program for students in our district. And I've been doing a major PR marketing campaign at all the schools. And I've gotten a really great reception from students. I think, I've tried to sell it as, you have voice and choice in, what you use and how you use it. And no one's going to know unless you are an ambassador. And they love the idea of teaching teachers, that they have something to offer. So that's been exciting. And I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants with this whole thing. I'm making it up as I go, but I know other people. I had talked to somebody from El Paso who had done something similar, and Albuquerque. And so, yeah, so that's something good.
That's awesome. That's really good. So is your goal of your ambassador program the students mentoring others? Is it really an awareness thing to get assistive technology more, just get the idea of it out there more?
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's my big focus this year is just marketing this stuff, because our district has invested in these tools as UDL tools. Everybody has access to it, and just really getting the word out, getting kids excited, getting teachers excited, and really, I feel like I hope that students feel empowered. To guide that change and to really embrace their voice. So,
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I've always found in schools when I can enlist a student to teach another student about a tool, it just goes so much better than I could ever hope to do. And every time it happens, and I have one of those positive experiences, you have one of those reflective moments, like why does this not happen more? Like, what can I do to make this happen more? How can I facilitate this to continue on? Because they're just such, when you listen to them, the two students talking to each other as they're learning, it's just such a deep, rich conversation. Not just about the tool. And I always think back to one student, and I always love that he said this, and it was fine. And he thought I was going to be mad, and I was not. I thought it was great. I heard him say to his trainee, he said, don't listen to what he said. I'm going to tell you how to really use it. And then he looked and he realized I was that close, and I was like, this is great. No, please tell him. I would rather you gave little like suggestions and tips and tricks and figured out a way to make it work for you, because that's what's gonna stick and that's what's gonna help you. And I always thought that's great.
yeah, absolutely. And I just think, I mean, the classic example, when I went in last week to do a classroom presentation at a middle school, which is a tough crowd anyways, I had one girl with her arms like kind of like this, and she was like, why are you even here? You know, but I was like, oh man, I got to flip this around really quick. And I was able to. And by the end of it, she was up right next to me helping teach all the kids about it. So I was like, perfect, and I could
Perfect.
just kind of move off to the side.
And you know what's going to be great? There's going to be something about that we're going to check in with you later in the year. She's going to be your biggest champion, right? They always talk about that idea with coaching. When we think about coaching, you don't want to, you're not there to convince the people that are already on your side. You want to convince someone who's maybe a skeptic, because they're going to be even stronger for in favor of yours once they see the value in it. And then they will be a stronger voice to share that as they go forward. Um, so I think that that'll be a really, that's great. That's exciting. I think that's awesome. I think one of the trickiest things I found with developing these kind of peer groups and getting students to kind of take ownership of this was in that students teaching staff moment. And it didn't always go well. And I think there was a handful of times that just the staff was not ready to be instructed by a student. And then that became a conversation in our larger coaching sessions. And in one school, I would get some time in staff meetings, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to kind of share something. And I brought that in as part of my conversation in one of the staff meetings about this idea of accepting training from someone who knew a little bit more than you, regardless of who they were. And it was a tough sell, and I got a lot of pushback from teachers. And you know, I think it was interesting because the trainer in question was kind of like the student that Kelly just described. This was a student that was kind of known as the I'm not going to do anything, and a little tough to reach. And then this person turned around and became the voice of, hey, you should all use Snap and Read. That just happened to be what they were using in that school. And some teachers had a hard time taking the shift and like, wait a second, aren't you the same student that I kind of see walk in the halls and not really in class? And it was tough. They didn't want to be shown by that student, which is a shame because this student was probably the best user of the tool. And it was a shame that it was a bit of a missed opportunity. Oh, look at you, Shannon. See, maybe it's better that you muted yourself, Shannon. Then you give us these very thought out blurs. Shannon said in the chat, simple sabotage. Tell the teacher they need to sabotage, and then they have permission to look like they don't know. Nice. Yeah, I like that, right? Good strategy. I'm all for that. Yeah, I think it's just really interesting. Doesn't it all go back to all of this goes back to our capacity building we constantly talk about. I'm going to enlist anybody I can to build some capacity. So it doesn't have to be me going everywhere, or in this case, Kelly going everywhere to teach everyone.
Well, and you know, I was talking to my sister-in-law, who she's a VP for a big advertising agency, and I really was like, hey, I need you to coach me. I really feel like this needs to be a marketing campaign. And how could I, you know, could you walk me through? And we haven't sat down long enough to have a huge conversation about it. But one thing she did say was, well, how could we develop a story about what you're trying to say, you know? And I think those stories that come from the kids that are personally meaningful and for that first person perspective. So I'm really trying to hold on to that. I love the idea of being able to tell stories about the impact, you know, that AT has had on different kids. So
yeah, and maybe it becomes even a standard kind of a quick video snippet of every student that's participating in this. It's, you know, it's just tell me about how technology has changed your approach to learning, and just listening. Because you're absolutely right. Stories are the best, right? Anya says stories, they connect us. People want a story. They want to tie it to something. I could sit and come in and talk to a staff meeting all year long about process and how you're supposed to do things and what this looks like, and it'll help student outcomes. And all of that can be undermined by 30 seconds of a student saying how they've been successful from something. That's it. That cemented it, and it did it in 30 seconds, and I didn't have to be anywhere near it. It was that person telling their story, and we don't do that enough. Janet puts a great comment in the chat. How about getting your graphic arts high school students to jump in and help with the PR and marketing? Let the student user present to them to help with understanding of how the tools make an impact. I think that's an awesome idea. In one of the schools I was just working in, we were we partnered with the TV, and I forget what their actual class was called, but it was TV video production. And we would gather up stories from staff of staff doing something creative with technology. And we would feed those pieces of information to the TV and video club, and they would send reporters out with a camera to interview people in their classroom real fast about what it is that they were doing. And then they would use that on the TV show that was shown inside the school. And it gave those students an opportunity to do real world kind of projects. It gave us a really nice library of video clips that we could show for technology and how it was working. And it gave that teacher some recognition for the good work they were doing, for something creative they were doing, which was awesome. There you go, Anya, a PR idea. Oh, you're tapping into the PR ideas today. A vignette of videos from students on how AT has impacted them, right? Just let it play. Put it up if you have a TV in your school, just let it run, right? In between those other things that happen. I think that's awesome. All of those things, you know, we're in the beginning of the year now, so now is the time to think about doing these. But one of the most powerful things someone that I was working with did last year is they collected these stories throughout the year and did exactly what Anya just said. When they went to their administrators for the end of the year to say, how did we do this year? They played a 5-minute video clip of students and educators being successful throughout the year and just let that play. And she said it was really interesting the way she did it. And I love it. She let it play, and then she kind of let it fade to nothingness, to black there. And then she looked at the group and she was like, well, any questions? And everybody's like, this is awesome. And then everybody had all these ideas about how they could make it better. But again, it was those little stories that impacted. And it was from their schools. It was educators that were in their school. It was students they saw day after day. It was so powerful. I love it. Hi, Janet. Thanks for joining the video. How was lunch? Good. Awesome. All right. So that's awesome. That's very good. Great idea of students helping others. Good. Well, Kelly, keep us updated on that for sure, because I can't wait to hear what comes of that. And, you know, like anything else, like we've just said, you want to raise the awareness, shoot lots of video of that. Have the kids shoot video of themselves doing it, of interviewing each other. You know, no video is bad video. Any video can be good. You know what I mean? And you just put those things out there so they have it. And then, you know, and are you pairing that with a resource site on like your school website where you can point people back towards?
Yeah, I've created an internal website and I'm working on an external one for parents as well. You know, really, I mean, I'm just really trying to put resources in people's hands, but also be there, a face. You know, I want people to know that the resources out there, but also who to call. Now, I'm in a little school district where I can do this. There's not 25 schools in Dripping Springs, Texas, which is a suburb of Austin. So I can't imagine trying to do this at a larger school district, but this is where I am right now. So yeah.
Well, that's good. And really, I think the process is the same, right? Mm-hmm. Little school, big school, the process is kind of the same. It's like, what do I put out there? And really, all of these resource sites, what happens? They grow over time anyway. So we get some basic information there, but just give people a place that they can constantly go back to.
Right, because that's part of the capacity building, right? Like I'm one person and I'm the only person on the AT team. So how can I build some resources that people will know to go to get their answers met, you know? So yeah.
No, I think that's great. For the group, what kinds of things should live on a school-based info page to really promote the idea of your AT services? Like, what do you suggest? What's your go-to resource that should be there? Shannon says the consideration process. So giving people a good sense of what you do and how you do it. I also agree, Shannon. It's so funny. I think if you ask the people that were going to that website, that would probably be the last thing they would think of. But to me, I'm with you. That should be the first thing that should be there. Is like, this is how we do things. And those things are matching students to appropriate technology. I recognize you only want to talk about the tech, but let me refocus us and bring us back to the process, which is equally as important. Anya says the set framework. I think all of these things are so critical. Go ahead, Shannon.
I think it's important. We work with our school districts because I've got about 48 that I support. Some are co-ops, smaller like Dripping Springs, but it's setting up the consideration process with your district's procedures and your district's basically UDL tools, how they can be used for assistive technology first. And I think that's the piece that it's not a one size fits all. And that's why having your own districts really tools to use the set framework, but use it based on the tools available in your district first. And then if those don't work, then you need that, where do you go next? But we're missing that piece.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think because ultimately people are going to go to your website to solve a problem. And if you have tools in place, some of those problems might be related directly to those tools you have in place. So there has to be some way, tutorials, cheat sheets, whatever it might be, links back to resources that live on the web that give them the path to solve that quick problem. But then how do we layer in this other stuff like, best practices and process and getting things matched effectively? Irene puts it in the chat, your philosophy, your overall goal about increasing and maintaining independence, your student driven, who the team is, how you function, how people can get to your team if they need you. What's your process for that?
How can you do that in a simple enough way that it doesn't take too much time and they don't get lost in the minutia? Because I've seen some that are so elaborate in some of my larger districts that they lose people. And so I go into classrooms and they're not doing it because it's too complicated. They don't have time to go through all of that.
Yeah.
So you've got, how do you simplify it enough to make it robust enough, but simple enough? And I think you have that balance. It's tricky.
It is tricky, and it's something that'll probably grow over time. And I think as you continue to build that capacity within your schools, you can see that page change, right? Because people will be ready for it. They'll have that basic foundational understanding. But yeah, I think you're right. What is that, that initial home page look like? And is it inviting enough that it doesn't scare people away, but it provides enough paths to answers that people feel that it's valuable? Right? Yes. And Irene says, go back to your marketing ideas of things. Think of the homepage as a brochure. It's a really good way to look at it. You think of a trifold brochure. It doesn't tell you everything, but it gives you a sense of who you are, what you're about, and how to get to you. And then, by the way, here's some other information. And I always think on the website, don't sleep on the idea of different modes for different people on those web. Don't have it all be text, don't have it all be video, but find some nice balance there where you're giving options where people can do that. Some of the most interesting things that I've seen on websites for AT teams are things like, download this audio and listen to our team talk about blah, blah, blah. And they're basically creating a podcast, but they're putting it to you in a podcast way without having to go find it somewhere. Here's a link to some audio you can listen to. Hear Kelly talk about these tools we have in district. Hear Kelly talk about our new initiative to bring in peer mentors about technology. Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea. And I'm going to get to hear from the person on the team that's doing it. Well, that's kind of fun. But it gives you some options of how they engage with your information. Yeah. And is this still Irene saying this? Irene, yes. Thank you. Practice what we preach and make sure you're accessible. Yeah. There is nothing as frustrating as an AT website that really doesn't offer some basic accessibility behind it. To make sure people can get to it. And then also, if you find a spot in there, promote the accessibility part, raise awareness about that. Like, hey, by the way, we're giving you this video. Don't forget, turn on the captions to experience the accessibility part of it. Or here's some audio, and here's the transcript if you want to read through it. And so pointing those pieces out to people, to put it on kind of the front of their brain a little bit, because it might not be what they're thinking about, but that might help cement some deeper understanding about AT and how you can help everyone with those supports. So those are really good ideas. Anything else that should be on a website? Any of your websites? What are some of your most powerful pieces you have on your website? If you think about your web page or a resource that you have, what's on there that's most powerful?
I know that for mine, there is a tab with about state testing, which nobody likes to talk about it, but it's a big deal, right? And those designated supports and accommodations that students can receive, because I find that's a big area that people don't understand, what's available and kind of what it would look like in the online testing platform. And so I've tried to create resources there, and we did create a district cheat sheet. It's a one-pager, and the left column says if the IEP or the 504 plan says this, then try this. So we're trying to link our UDL tools to what the accommodation is, right? So, and giving them different options of how to practice it. And down at the bottom, of course, it reminds everybody that students need to be routinely and independently using these tools in order to have that as an accommodation on state testing. So that's been one thing that I think is a big go-to for a lot of people in my district.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful piece of information, right? It's demystifying this idea, accommodations and testing, and what does all that mean? If this happens, this is the solution. And it's making very clear connections to that people can understand. Which I think are so powerful. Jennifer says they have a support for writing AT in the IEP on their website. So some resource, again, very concrete examples of pieces of information you can share with people, like this is going to help you be better in your practice. If you're an educator, if you are a parent or a family member, what can we give you to make sure that you understand a little bit more about not only the tools that are out there, but how we work as a team to make sure that we're meeting your child's needs with those tools, right? Because ultimately that is your face to the community as well. Right? And you think about that, it has to do those multiple. That's what makes it so tricky over time, is that this website is your face to not only your internal community, but your external community. How are you going to make sure that it achieves those things, again, without being too bogged down? Because we've all seen resource pages that are just endless, which are great if you're ready for that. And it goes back to what Shannon said, if someone's ready to dig into a resource that's, I'm going to scroll through 10 pages of links, great. There's certain days I'm ready for that, and there's certain days I'm not ready for that. I just need some real kind of broad strokes on something, and that's it. I'm good. And so finding those balances. Hey, Jenna.
I think we need to also think about differentiating for training instructors. I mean, if we're going to instruct on how to use a tool, we have to also think about differentiated tutoring and coaching, because I know that, we always have teachers who say, just send me the video and I'll watch it. And then we have other teachers who say, I just want a tip sheet because I have to print it out and read it and look at it as I use the tool. So I know if some teachers don't get a printed tip sheet, they're not ever going to try and use the tool, because that's the way they like to learn. And, there is no one size fits all with teachers either. So if we're going to build a website, make sure, like you said, it's not only accessible, but we have to go by learning preferences too. Otherwise, we're going to lose our teachers.
Exactly. And if we think about that ahead of time, right, we go with the UDL approach to this and think proactively in the beginning. If as we build this array of supports, and if we're thinking about that every kind of area of focus may have a video and a tip sheet and some other resource links, then we not only catch them where they are when they start learning about something, but give them something to go back to once they've gotten some foundational knowledge. Maybe they're not ready for the video in the beginning. They just want the tip sheet. And then they look at the tip sheet and go, oh, I'd really like to see that in action. Oh, there's a video. Let me watch that. And so, yeah, you're right. It's giving everyone different entry points into this and different opportunities to get deeper into that learning. Yeah, it's really cool. So what you're saying is we got a lot of work to do. The heck are we all doing sitting here? We got a lot of work today. It's so interesting to think about, and it goes back to that idea of prioritizing our work, thinking about where do we get the biggest bang for our buck of our time, right? And so, it becomes really tricky as, not only thinking about this from a perspective of, even, and I'm thinking of Kelly's bringing in students to support us in that path, and then thinking about connecting with other departments where we are. Can we tap into other people's knowledge base and give them these kinds of jobs to do for us? I would love a website,
Yes.
right?
I'll just say, I mean, last year, I just decided it was also my mission to get into those curriculum department meetings. And I was like, by golly, I'm going to do it. And our district calls it Learning and Innovation Department. But, I was meeting, I identified stakeholders. We have instructional coaches and librarians, which are called facilitators for learning and innovation. I have just, like, I'm constantly showing up at their table, at their meetings, and they have embraced it. It was at first they were like, why is Martini here? But I mean,
What she
again,
want from us?
yeah, I just, my message being, it's all about design. We need to be designing curriculum that's accessible and that we're really embracing this UDL. And, we've invested a lot of money into these products, these UDL products for all, but it doesn't help if our curriculum is not, accessible. And I think they're listening, they're hearing, but you kind of have to be like that woodpecker. You don't go away. You keep
Yeah, right.
hitting away. Yeah.
Some people would call us the bad penny, whatever it might be. You just continue to just show up. And I think beyond the just showing up, it's about finding ways to be an active participant in what's important to them without being overbearing, right? It's, again, finding our spot, our sweet spot of supporting their initiatives, but also guiding it towards what we're there to support as well. And then everybody starts to recognize that value of that, right? It's all those relationships, working with people in relationships, right? Here we are. We're 30 minutes in and we have not talked about a piece of technology yet. That sounds about right for this group, right? And we're talking about people, processes, and relationships here. That's what we're always talking about. But it's so important. I mean, because the tech part, that part we can figure out as we go, right? We'll figure that part out. It's these making these connections and figuring out the best ways to do that. So interesting. I love this. I could talk process all day. I really could. I could just keep talking about this. This is great. What else? What else? What other things do we think? I was like this. Someone asked me this the other day, and I'll ask you guys because I gave one answer. I'm curious what you guys ask. One answer. The email came and they said, if you had 15 minutes to talk to the administration of a district and get them to get the understanding of the importance of AT, what would you do? 15 minutes, you're in front of all of the district administration. Hi, Cal. So what would you do? Would you go deep? Would you go process? Would you go tools? Would you go stories? What would you do?
I think a story. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
That was my answer too, by the way. I gave away my answer too. That was my answer. This person had sent me their slides they were going to use for 15 minutes, and it was like 20 slides, and they were dense. They were good slides, but it was all about set and quiet and process and forms and referrals and this and that. And then like at the very end, like out of 20, it was like slide 19. It was like a picture of a student. And then they had said, well, I'm just going to tell the story about the student. I was like, oh, cool. I said, take slides 1 through 18 and drop them and start at 19. Start with that story and then ask people if they have any questions. I think you could do just as much with that picture of a student being successful in a classroom up behind you and just talk for a few minutes about everything that was on slides 1 through 18. You can choose some of those things you want to talk about, but have your image be that student. And it was a student in the classroom working with other students being successful using technology. And I was like, that's your background. Just put that up and then just talk a little bit about AT and talk about what your accomplishments were last year and talk about what you hope to accomplish this year. And ask for them to support you. Say, we need your support to make this happen. I haven't heard what happened. I'm hoping that person still has a job. We'll see what happens. I don't know. It seemed like a good way to go. But yeah, I think it's, we want so bad sometimes to get everything out there that we do too much too soon. Right? Go ahead, Anya.
In one of Chris Bouguet's talk, and this is a story that sort of really resonated with me when I heard it, he talks about how we all are using assistive technology that was actually intended for people with disabilities 20 years ago, and now it's ubiquitous, right? Like touching, like all direct select or text to speech. I mean, that wasn't intended for all of us yet. We utilize it, or text or word prediction, and so that sort of like can captivate an audience. Like, oh, I didn't, many people don't realize that, and that can kind of hook them into. And there's more for people, and we, don't necessarily have maybe outlying disabilities, but imagine what that can do for people who do struggle in certain areas. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful, right? It's doing a lot there. I mean, you're bringing people into the conversation. You're also demystifying. I think part of our role a lot of times is to demystify and kind of, is this even a word? Decomplicate things. I don't even know if that's a word, sorry. But just make things less complex for people. They hear this term and it sounds really important and it's written into the IDEA and, oh man, we better do that. Assistive technology. And then we really start talking about it a little bit, and it can be some simple solutions that happen every day in a classroom that people might not even realize or might not even make that little connection. And so, thinking about how to do that and get those points across. My ending suggestion to that person with all the slides was, you'll get a chance to show those slides to people. Have that be like the second or third time you meet with people, then start dropping some of those slides in. Ease into those slides. I know it's important. I know that process is valuable, and being, focusing on the best practices, that's critical. That's really important. But for that first moment where people are just seeing you, to be honest, as just another bullet on an agenda, right? You're on an agenda and it's like, oh, we've done these 3 things and their bullet was towards the end. And think about what you're going to show. I have this coming up later in the week, the same kind of issue where I've been added into an agenda of a statewide directors meeting, and I'm going to get 15 minutes to talk about the project I want people to sign up for. And my 15 minutes is from 12:15 to 12:30. The meeting, I think, ends at 12:45. So that's not going to be a lot of in-depth conversation there with a lot of words on the screen, that's for sure. But finding a way to say to them, this is important and it is worthy of your 15 minutes. But it's tricky though, and hoping to figure out a way to share that with them. And so they'll continue on, and I'll catch them at another time, hopefully. So we'll see. All right, what else should we talk about? I have completely dominated the conversation. I'm going to just stare at all of you now. What do you want to talk about? Don't shut your cameras off. That's weird. Don't do it. What else is going on?
I was going to ask a question. I'm sorry, I've talked a lot during this meeting, but
You've talked a
I
lot.
did.
You should see how much I've talked.
I,
Go ahead.
well, you have talked more than me.
I have. I know.
No, I did have a question for you guys, and so I'm working with some teams on again, curriculum design, and do you guys have a go-to reference, like a one pager about kind of do's and don'ts for accessibility when you're creating assignments that you give to teachers? I mean, I know I could probably put one together, but if somebody has one already that they like, that they use.
I have an answer, but I'm waiting. All right, I'll talk since everybody else is thinking. I love sharing with people the information from the AIM Center about poor. I think it's really simple and straightforward. And it helps them kind of wrap their heads around this idea of what might make something accessible without feeling too heavy. There's always that fear of the accessibility talk where it's like it suddenly feels too technical for people and they check out. Like, I don't know how to do. I don't know alt text. What does that mean? Like if you start with those kinds of things, it's too much. But if you look at and even I'll sometimes just share the video that Luis does that's on their website, where he just breaks down the 4 areas of poor: perceivable, operable. Is it understandable or usable? What is it? Understandable and
Understandable.
robust. Yeah. Really great. And I'll try to find the link for it once somebody else starts talking. But yeah, it's really good. I think it's a really good starting point because I think also each of those 4 areas that you bring up in kind of an overview allows you to go deeper as they start to think about, well, what does that mean when I'm creating curricular materials? What does that mean when I'm creating? And that's your opportunity to dive a little deeper into some of that stuff that might feel more technical right off the bat. But at least it gives them some opportunities to have some framework behind it as you're thinking about it.
Okay.
Anybody
Thank
else?
you.
What does anybody else use? You actually feel my eyes on you? I'm going to stare at each one. I've stared at each one of your little boxes. Kelly, not
Well,
you. You asked the question. Oh, but it worked on you. You started talking. Okay.
Well, no, maybe I can give you guys more. I'm sure you guys see this. Like, for example, I'm working with a 5th grade team and I can't believe anyways, I'm going to put my feelings aside. This year, I don't know if they're just exhausted from technology, but they're handing kids, like, for example, during English language arts, they'll do a reader's response to something they've read, and they are handing everybody a worksheet, like a physical worksheet. And I'm like, no, like we were using like a educational management system, Canvas, and like things last year were available on Canvas, and at least that worksheet would have been a PDF, which I could have, my student could have used Snap and Read and have it read and use the annotation tool to type into it. So it's just like basic things. Like, I would love to have a one pager that said, if you're going to make a hard copy available, make a digital copy available. Don't use those cutesy fonts that you see all over Teachers Pay Teachers. They're
Right.
not good. Just practical stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because my takeaway was that the poor special ed teacher who looks like her hair is on fire, she's like, oh my God, Kelly, I can't retrofit all of this. Like, I can't scan every worksheet in, and so that there's a digital copy. And I was like, no, and you shouldn't have to. Like, when we're putting it out there, it should be already ready to go for
Right.
everybody from here to there. So,
Yeah.
sorry, I get a little tired of having the same conversation year after year.
No, it's so true. It's interesting when we think about, those are great examples of opportunities to remind people. And this is my fear, that we were going to slip backwards after people returned to school from the pandemic, and that is my fear realized right there. Is that those things were digital at some point, because they weren't giving people paper. Right. And now we've turned back and they've become paper again. Now, if there is a value to it being paper, I'm up for that conversation. But I don't know that that's always the case. And that's frustrating. This is a let's go back to doing it the way we used to approach to things. And that's the fear I had when we started going back to school after the pandemic, is that any of the headway we made with accessibility and thinking about options disappeared when we went back to the classroom. People are like, I'm just going to run them off the copy machine. Here we go. And that's not good.
Mike, what I found interesting was the principals who want to support the teachers who are exhausted and say, okay, you guys don't want to use the LMS anymore. We're back in in-person instruction. Let's go back, let's ease back into it, and let's not make all that extra work. But my side of it was, you guys have already done it. You have everything you use digitally when the kids were home. So why aren't we just going back to last year's lesson plans where the stuff is already scanned? Like, why is it so important? And there are some people, yes, paper is important for certain things and math, and I get it, but there are certain people that are just really hell bent. Well, I made packets and drove them to my kids at home last year during COVID. And I was just like, whoa, like, come on, folks. And how accessible was it? And the best part was when I had a student who said, oh, I use the text to speech all the time and I'm not classified. And I think that it almost like blew a teacher's head off. Like it just,
Sure.
well, you're not supposed to use it. Well, but if it helps, why are you gonna, discourage it? If it helps that child to read and understand and the comprehension improves. So I don't know. I'm kind of amazed at, we have all of the material digitized now. Why wouldn't you use it? Like, why are you recreating the wheel? Just post it. Yes.
And this idea, this kind of fallacy that making it accessible is creating more work is just not true anymore. Like you said, we've already done any of the work we had, and 90% of the things that we provide in paper anyway start digitally. And yet what do? We make them paper, which becomes the barrier. And that's the issue. So why, it's that same myth of all assistive technology is expensive, and that's not true either. Just like this is extra work to create something that's digitally accessible. It's just not. And it's tough. Go ahead, Jenna.
I have a question for you, Mike, in the vein of what the kind of the theme of what today's meeting was supposed to be. I was wondering if you all had teachers who made instructional videos last year and are using them as kind of supplemental supports now that we're back in the classroom. Are they just forgetting about all those amazing videos that they spent hours and hours making? And is it only maybe just for the kids who have to be quarantined since we're back in person? Like, what is everybody doing with all those videos, those hours of videos teachers made?
That's such a great question, right? Because what a lost opportunity if those just got shuttled away to the back of someone's Google Drive, right? It's just such a missed opportunity. Yeah, is anybody experiencing that?
I'm not sure that they're using the videos, sadly.
Janet, what are you seeing? You asked the question, you must have seen something.
Well, I just thought it would be such a perfect opportunity for all those teachers who wanted to jump in and flip their classrooms. And now the material's made and it's ready to go, why not try it? Like you're one step in already. You know, I'm at a different school now, so I don't have the chance to go back to all those teachers and say, hey, remember those amazing videos you made? What are you doing with them? But again, we've got a lot of kids who are going to be quarantined, and even though we're back in person, I've heard principals say we're not going to be using the LMS the way we did before. So what are we going to do with those kids who are home for 2 weeks because they have to quarantine? Well, we're just going to give them packets, or just post up your packet for the week and they'll have to work on it on their own. And I'm like, but you already have the videos made. Just post, like, I don't know.
And I wonder if it has to be like kind of almost like an explicit conversation of, hey, remember those that you used for virtual instruction? Why don't we talk about blending those into your current instruction? Like, I wonder if it needs someone to actually say it out loud to people in order for the connection to be made. Like, I wonder if certain people are just like, it's kind of the idea with the digital materials, right? It's like, whew, that was last year. And now this is a whole new year. So forget that, it's over. We could argue it's far from over, but they're moving on to another phase, and haven't made that connection. Because even for some of those things they created last year, Janet, wouldn't it be interesting if we provided instruction to educators on how to chop up and use even parts of those in a different way? Like, not saying put a whole 45-minute video out for people, but man, what about taking 10 minutes of a concept and just cutting that out and sharing that in a certain way, and making them kind of rethink how they kind of can remix their teaching using some of this content from last year, to improve the way this year goes. And I don't know if anybody's going that route and thinking of that. The people I've spoken to already this school year feel like I feel for people, and I feel for you guys if you're in a school right now, because I think people are starting at a very not great spot right here, and it's September and they're already not in a good spot, a good headspace, just in general, and that's unfortunate, because these things all sound great from the guy who sits in his house in shorts every day. It all sounds fantastic. But I recognize that, if you're in a school and you're trying to work out the 1,000 other things you have to do all day, it might not be as easy as, taking a video and chopping 10 minutes out of it.
I can jump in. I know I have the perspective of two different districts, the district that my children are in and then the district I work in. And the district that I work in, for if we have students like out on quarantine, and we are pretty strict about that compared to some of our neighboring districts, we have a selection of a group of teachers and staff who then evaluate what work needs to be completed. They send a packet of information. They have to be quarantined for 7 days. They can get a COVID test after 5, and if it comes back negative, then they can come back. So then if they do test positive, they're going to be out longer. Then it's the responsibility of that team and that teacher to decide how to move forward with instruction. And it's somewhat similar in my own kids' district as well. But we were, my own children, were virtual all last year. We had a virtual academy taught by the district teachers. And so since I was working alongside of all of them, I got to witness a lot of what they did in their learning management system. And they recorded tons of content, read alouds, and my kids are in elementary and intermediate, but read alouds and mini lessons and all sorts of stuff like that. So it'll be really interesting. I have heard nothing from my kids' district, other than my older one uses Google Classroom. My middle, who's in 3rd grade, is beginning to use Google Classroom. They still have access to Seesaw, but we have not been given any devices that go back and forth, or even access to their Seesaw accounts at this point. And we're only a couple weeks into the school year. But to me, that was one of the benefits. I loved seeing the work they were posting in Seesaw, and as a parent, being able to go back and see, what their responses were, a little bit of what the assignment was. And I've never, and my oldest is in 6th grade, and all of those elementary years of her, I've never known as much of what was going on in her classroom and what she was learning as I did last year. And, partially because I was sitting right next to most of them, but also because I had access to that learning management system and was able to get those updates. And already we're getting like their math packets sent home with the parent sheet. Well, great, but I'd actually like to see how they're explaining their thinking in their Seesaw activity. So I think we need to continue to have those conversations with people, but I think, I think it goes back to those coaching conversations. And I even think of some of the Brené Brown stuff where you have to kind of rumble in that uncomfortableness, and you really have to really kind of call out teachers in a respectful way, having those conversations. That just takes time. It's hard to send out a 1-pager, Kelly, and say, this is what you should do, because you need to get to the heart of what the problem is sometimes, and really have them see your side along with you seeing their side of things. And, if that's making them feel heard, that you understand that they've got a to-do list that's a million miles long, that's okay. But then you need to come up with solutions to those barriers and work together. But again, it comes back to some of those coaching conversations that just take time.
They do. And what's so interesting, Jennifer, when you shared that you never felt more connected to your child's learning than last year. And you could boil all of that down to what? Effective communication and making those connections. And those are so important. And now we're in a new school year where maybe that's not happening yet. And isn't it even more glaring this year than it might have been previously for you, because you have last year to compare
Absolutely.
to? Yeah.
Absolutely. And as an example, like our kids use Lucy Calkins for reading instruction, and we learn about all their superpowers, their reading superpowers and stuff. And we've translated all of those into when we're doing, bedtime stories, and our daughter, our 1st grader, is reading to us, oh, what superpower could you use here? Whereas with my 6th grader, I would have never had that language for our context for conversation. And I wonder how that really affects their learning, because we're able to carry over some of that into the home environment. And I think it just speaks to the need to have greater communication and understanding, knowing that not all parents are going to do that, but that doesn't mean we don't make that effort.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. We have to still make the effort. Yeah, it is really interesting. And now you guys have me thinking of those hundreds of hours of instruction that are sitting somewhere recorded already. Hundreds and hundreds of hours just sitting. And how could we get that in somehow into our instruction, even if it's provided? And I think Janet, you might have said it, that idea of providing it as pre-instruction to the class. Like, here, if you feel like you might need some foundational understanding about what we're going to cover, here's an option. Here's some information from last year that's recorded that you can go through it, and then be ready to be a more active participant in the conversation this year. I'm going to start asking my schools what they're doing with all that. Now you've given me something that's pushed to the top of my list. I'm just going to ask people, like, where is all that stuff? What are we doing with it?
And I like Janet's idea of, oh my gosh, that's a great idea for a conference presentation. I think that would be really great to work with a few teachers who have a lot of virtual content and see how they can integrate that into, a more typical year.
Right.
People probably out on quarantines a lot, but
yeah, but have the flexibility of the instruction that it can approach a flipped model or some kind of hybrid model, even in the classroom. Can we infuse that in?
I think of it more as UDL. I mean, you
Yeah.
can use that as UDL. So maybe you're doing your more traditional in-person approach to teaching with lecturing or, whatever you're doing, but then as supplement as supplemental, you can utilize some of that stuff that you've already created as another means of representation or expression if it's a way to respond.
Yeah, sure. Even factor in some of those little chunks of material into small group activity that people then respond back to in some way, even if they're in the classroom, but they're guided by these little small, it becomes less about a lesson and more about a learning module. These become learning modules at this point that you just string together, and think about how how those can help forward the instruction, whether it's live or whatever. Oh, that's so interesting. Now that's all I can think about now. All right, you've done it. You've impacted my day for the rest of the day. I'm going to think about that as I sit and chew on that. As we started, for the couple of people that were here, they heard me warn that I was going to shut us down on time today because I have a meeting that starts right at 1. Normally, I just kind of drift along for the rest of the day, maybe hit a meeting here or there, but I got like a 1 and then a 1:30. So I will say as we get closer to the top of the hour, any final thoughts or some wrap up conversation that anybody wants to share? Okay. Well, I've been called a buzzkill before, and I can kill a conversation like the best of them. That's fine. As we wrap up, then I will point you towards our virtual conference that's coming up soon. If you haven't signed up yet, the website for our virtual 2-day AT conference, which happens not next week, but the week after, on Thursday and Friday, the 23rd and the 24th. And our website is bit.ly/2021 NJATS. I can't put it in the chat because my computer's frozen and I can't get to the chat. But it's bit.ly/2021 NJATS. It is free. Sign up. It's all virtual. You can pop in and out. We have some great sessions from some people that are here with us from week to week. Very exciting. So hopefully you will join us for that. Yeah, I think that was it. That's all I had. All right. Well, I'll let everybody go back to their day. It was a pleasure as always. I will see you next Monday. Have yourselves a good rest of the week, everybody. See ya.